Hi everybody, Mr. Johnson here, and we are going to talk about our 3D found object value scale art project. I know it's a wordy title, but it's a lot of fun. Hopefully you've watched the lesson on value before doing this project. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure that you go and watch that so that you really get a good sense for what we're doing for this assignment. So let's go. So a value scale is a scale that moves from white to black or from black to white, showing the shades of gray in between. So on the top example, this is a value scale, right, that starts off at white, and each box gets progressively darker until we end up at pure black. So they add just a tiny bit of black to the white here, and you get light gray. Just a little bit more black, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and so on, and so on, and so on, till you end up with black. The value scale underneath it is both opposite in that it starts with black and ends up at white. It doesn't matter which direction the scale goes. It's entirely up to you. But this is a gradation scale, and that means that it's a fade, a general fade from one value to the next instead of these rigid kind of individual boxes. Both scales are perfectly acceptable. It's entirely up to you which method you would like to base your sculptural project on. So, what is a found object sculpture? Well, that's a sculpture using objects that you find. Right? So you are not creating the subject for the sculpture. What you're doing is you're finding materials that fit your needs, and then you are laying them out into the composition that you like. So in this example, right, look at how this art teacher has created this value scale that moves from white on the left side of the screen to black on the right with various shades of light gray, right, medium gray, dark gray in between them. Now, this is a found object value scale because you still have the values that you find in these images, but instead of just being boxes, right, that you've shaded, they are made out of objects that you find around the house. So the key to this project is looking for a lot of stuff. And you want things that are shades of gray, including white and black, that are all of the shades in between. So make sure you don't just have a lot of dark things, you don't just have a lot of light things. You want to have an even mix for every value on your value scale. So let's watch how she does it. Hi. So she's laying out her objects. She's doing it just on her kitchen floor, but you can do it anywhere as long as you have a blank background. She's laying out her objects, and you'll notice that she moves them and repositions them if they're not in the right spot. Okay, so I love this value scale. I'm gonna look at just the plain image for a second so that it's easier to see when we talk about it. A couple things that I think are really important here. The first one, obviously, is that she's included a bunch of the values from white to black, so you have that accurate fade, which is what you want. The way you can tell if your value scale really works, I think, is to step back from it or look at a photo of it, and if you kind of squint, that way you're not really looking at what the objects are, you can see if they fade from white to black. Personally, if you could have found something that was a gray in between this white and this first gray, that would be great. That seems to be the biggest jump in her value scale, but overall, it's excellent. One of the other things that I think is really cool about this, and what I would really push you to try and do, is find so many objects that you're really looking at the value of them and not the particular objects themselves. So once you have this on the screen for more than a few seconds, you can look and see, oh, well, there's an iPod, there's an oven mitt, there's a purse, there's a camera cover, there's a glasses case, there's a remote control. So you can pick out the individual objects. But it's not about what the objects are, it's really about what value those objects represent. So a big key to this project is photographing the finished artwork in a really good quality way so that it is clear, that it's concise, and that everyone can see really well what you're doing. So here are a couple of tips for that. First, have clear, even lighting, no distracting shadows. So if there are shadows that fall across part of the subject, you don't want that. Either add a lamp, use natural light, do it just on the floor of a room like she did, or on a table. That's great. Have an uncluttered, simple background. So don't do this on top of a patterned rug, because that's going to be distracting to the subject, which are your objects and the value. So whether it's on the floor or on a table, that works out really well. If you don't have a space available to you like that, maybe just put a sheet down so that you've got a solid color, or lay out some sheets of paper and then arrange your objects on top of that so that the background is uncluttered and does not distract from your subject. Shoot from a direct angle so everything is clearly visible. Right? You want to make sure that we can see the objects so we can see all of them. So don't crop off part of the value scale when you take a photo, and also make sure you're not shooting it from such an angle that you can't see what the objects are. Hold your phone or camera steady, or use a tripod. If you don't have a tripod available, that's fine, but just make sure that you're not bopping that camera around. Really try to hold it as steady as you can when you're taking your images. Make sure your image is in focus. This is a very simple one, but it's something that is so important when photographing artwork. If you're using a smartphone, you can often just click on the screen on the area that you would like to be in focus when your camera app is open, and it will focus on that part of the subject. It's a great way to do it. Take multiple photos and choose the best one. This is the easiest tip to get a good quality photo, because while you have your camera set up, instead of clicking it once, click it a couple of times, and then pick the best one, because sometimes your camera moves just a little bit. It's just that little bit blurry, right? Pick the best photograph. And then make sure you crop out any unnecessary information. We want to see the value scale. So if there's other stuff in the background, if there are objects on the table, or there are things on the floor around the edges of that photo, crop it so that we don't see them, right? We don't want to be distracted from looking at your artwork, which is the value scale. So here's an example that I found online, and I've put a actual grayscale, a value scale underneath it, so you can kind of see where the objects line up. Now this one is very different from the first example that I showed you, because it uses a lot less objects, and here it's much easier to tell what the individual objects are. I think that's okay. I definitely prefer the first one that has a lot more things in it. I think it's a lot more visually interesting. But this does do a good job at showing the different values, from pure white, a little bit of gray. You can see here the gray gets a little bit darker. The sunglasses they're a little bit purple. They're not exactly gray. I don't love that. But again, I just found this on Google, so oh well. You can see here the objects get a lot darker, and then this steering wheel is the darkest object. So it does work. This meets all of the requirements. It's fine. I don't think it's exciting to look at, but it's certainly fine. So remember, the more you have, I think the better. So I'm going to shrink myself here. So here are the instructions. Find objects from around your home that range in value from black to white. Include all of the values. So I have a value scale at the bottom of the screen here. You can flip back to the beginning of this video to see those examples as well. Or you can find any kind of value scale from the internet. There are a lot of examples. So make sure you're including all of the values. Now, this image here looks great, but it's what I don't want you to do. That's number 2. That's don't use colorful objects and then add a grayscale filter, because that means that the filter is doing the work, and I don't want the filter to do the work. I want the objects to do the work. So at first glance, the image on the screen here looks awesome. You go, oh, wow, look, white, and then light gray, medium gray, dark gray, black, totally works. Except that these are not gray objects. These are just regular colored objects that they put a filter on. That is lazy, and that's cheating. So don't do that. Make sure you arrange them in order. Just don't just put all of your objects together. You should go in a row. Have a clean, empty background. Take a good quality photo. And please use at least 20 objects. The value scale on the screen is a 10-step scale. So that means 2 objects per section in general. That gives you 20 objects. More is definitely better, but see what you have, play around with it, have a lot of fun. Make sure you're uploading a good quality photo. If you're unsure about objects that you should use, post them to your digital portfolio and I will give you feedback on it. So if you don't know if an object will work or would count as being grayscale, let me know. We can talk about it before you submit your finished project. I hope you have a lot of fun with this. It's a lot of fun to make. It's fun to go on a scavenger hunt, get your family involved, have people help you try to find things that are the values that you need. And I hope you have a really good time. If you have questions, please post on the Google Classroom, send me an email, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Have fun!